All right, I will call this April 14th meeting of Left One Disability Board to order then. I should have waited for that. Now I'll call the Left One Disability Board meeting for April 14th to order. We have an agenda. Any discussion on the agenda? Everyone good with the agenda?
Yes.
Great. Roll call. Do we actually need to do a roll call, or we know who's here, right? You need a roll call?
I have it recorded, but Mary Ann, do we need to go through a formal roll call as well?
You know, it's always a good idea to do that, Jenny.
Okay, great. Let's start with people on the screen then. Mary Ann, you're up there right now. Maybe we'll start with you.
Mary Ann Hardy, HR Director, present.
Ed?
Who's next?
Ed? You.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Ed Sorger, retired, left one.
Sean?
Sean Smith at large.
Thank you. Let's just go around the room.
Jennifer Schaefer, Human Resources HR Liaison.
John Zimmerl.
Leilani Jensen, Acting Assistant HR Director.
And Lenny Greenstein, Lacey Council. All right. Any changes or anything to the agenda? Anybody? No? Good. Okay. We need a motion to approve the agenda then.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
We do have a quorum, right?
Good question. We do, don't we?
I think for LEOFF, you have to have 2 members
okay.
present.
Oh, okay.
It's a total of 5 members, right? And we have 3 present, so we have a quorum.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Ed.
Yep.
Approval of meeting minutes from the March 10th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review them? I would entertain a motion.
Your turn, Sean.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, business items. Review comparable jurisdiction policies and procedurals for dental.
We'll go ahead and present the.
I'm sorry, I can't really hear that.
I'm going to go ahead and present the screen here.
Okay.
So I sent you all an email, and then I also attached this to the meeting invite. And I'm going to pan out just a little bit here. These are the comparable policies from jurisdictions that are of similar size. And so these are the policies that we were able to gather from these different jurisdictions on the left-hand side. Their policy is on the right-hand side here.
Okay, so for the record, I reviewed them, but they're not showing on the screen here.
Oh,
I need to share the screen. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Now, Ed? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So were there any that you guys saw that you liked the verbiage when you were reviewing them?
Well, I liked the verbiage on some of them. It looks like we're moving ahead towards a full coverage issue with what I've been reviewing. So I guess my question is, similar to what we have for medical with MedAdvantage and joining a group sort of cooperative statewide for left one people that we entered. Is there such a thing for dental, Jenny?
I'm sorry, Ed, can you say that one more time?
I'm just asking for coverage with dental. Is there a group coverage that's available to jurisdictions that have left one boards for their members, similar to what there is for the medical?
I am not sure. Marianne, do you know?
Yeah, you bet. I'll be happy to jump in. That's a great question because as we know, dental definitely impacts other health conditions potentially, right? If you don't have good dental coverage, But having said that, the RCW is very specific about what are allowed expenses for reimbursement. And specifically, it talks about the medical. So there isn't, unfortunately, an option for a dental insurance plan. I went through this in Edmonds where we asked and we looked into this to see if we could actually provide a dental insurance plan. And unfortunately, it was, as you can well understand, as we get older, we have more needs, which is natural in terms of medical needs. And so that was just it's cost prohibitive, right, to provide a dental insurance plan for the carriers. So that's why they don't offer it. So unfortunately, there isn't an option that we could offer. But again, if the board, would like to, if it makes sense to offer a dental reimbursement policy, it seems like there are some, potential options in here for that. And just so you have an idea as well, so the board knows for frame of reference for employees, we have a plan that's under AWC that covers up to $1,500 a year for your typical 2 cleanings a year, your class 1, right? When you start getting into your restoratives and things like that, it's partial coverage, but it's a total of $1,500 a year. So just be aware that what you're looking at here really isn't outside of what the typical, and we believe we have a good plan through the city. So just a little bit of frame of reference for you, if that helps.
And I can add a little to that. That's the business that I'm in my day job. I'm in the insurance business. And the reality is, and I've been doing it 32 years, I think now, there's no such thing as good dental insurance. It just doesn't exist. That's just the reality. $1,500 max annual cap is about as good as you get. I mean, the highest I think I've ever seen is $2,500 in the market. And again, just my opinion, but it kind of goes against the actual purpose of insurance. Insurance is supposed to cover that which you can't afford to cover yourself. So personally, I'd rather see if you had dental that had a $3,000 deductible and then covered something, because that's the stuff people can't afford. The first $1,500 just doesn't go very far, but it is typical of what dental insurance looks like.
So my question, Lenny, then is, for instance, for an example, I pay $62 a month for Delta.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I were to do 60, that's for, I'm sure there's some co-pays and stuff, but so $62 a month times 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so
And
if we had
you probably get 2 cleanings and x-rays a year at no charge. Fillings and basic services are at no charge. And then anything more than that, you're paying some portion of it. And it probably has a cap, unless it's a dental HMO. They typically don't have the caps of, again, $1,500 or something like that as a cap, typically. Even after you're paying the $62 a month.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So if we were to talk about full dental, then there's not really, I don't know. Would members have to submit their dental invoices to the city, or how would that work? I mean, Marianne, could you tell us how that worked when you were in Redmond? Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, that was me.
Okay.
Edmonds, yes, I'd be more than happy to. But before the board continues, I just want to recognize that board member Bob Cecil has joined us for the meeting. So if we can make sure we reflect that in the notes. So in terms of process, what typically would happen is the member would go to the dentist and they would have the services, taken care of, and then they would submit the bill to the city, and the city would reimburse the left one member. So then we don't get into the situation where we're having to create vendor setups for every single vendor. It gets a little bit administratively burdensome, right? So the member pays for it, and then submits it. And if the board says, it's $1,500, $2,000 a year, right? Then, and the board's comfortable with HR having that policy in place, we can reimburse the member up to that amount.
But you're suggesting a 1,500 cap.
Oh, no. What I was saying was again, I think the policy, like Olympia, says 2,000. And to Council Member and Chair Greenstein's point, we are grateful that we have dental insurance in the city, right? And $1,500, of course. If you have a crown, root canal, you're out of luck. You're going to be paying out of pocket, but still, it's better than not having any coverage if you haven't had coverage. So I was just giving a frame of reference for 15. I believe even in Edmonds, we had a policy that covered $2,000 a year. So, and again, if you see like Olympia and some of the wording on these jurisdictions that we pulled, that doesn't seem to be an unreasonable amount, especially if you're going to end up having, which hopefully you won't, but a more invasive procedure. It'll help cover the cost of that.
And I do think you need a limit of some kind, Ed, because to go unlimited on dental, I mean, you could get into some real big money in a hurry. Dental work can get very expensive.
Well, absolutely. And just like implants could run $30,000 for a full set, probably. I don't know, but I would say that's probably possible.
This is Sean. I kind of want to bring something up that I think is important to capture in the notes, that initially when we did Medicare Advantage for the folks that are in our program, is that they had insurance, and then they would have to make sure that their service provider had that insurance. Now, on the flip side of this is dental, so they're able to use whatever dentist office that they are already visiting or being seen, and then they just provide the reimbursement. So now this doesn't make them have to find a dentist that offers that insurance. So I think the point that you all made earlier, as far as having to set up all the different insurance companies, would be avoided.
It also gives people the ability to negotiate with the dentist, because I will tell you that if you're a cash payer without insurance, they do negotiate their fees, especially for the more expensive stuff.
Okay,
And
so go ahead.
you'll note on some of these example jurisdiction languages for some of the like specialty stuff, like for example, looks like that might be Olympia. Yeah, Olympia has a denture provision that talks about submitting 2 quotes from a dentist that does the dentures prior to, going in for service. So I think to your point, Sean, there's a lot of those regular services that you would just go to any dentist and maybe negotiate, like Councilmember Greenstein mentioned, your price. But that's the other thing we're trying to determine with the board today too, is do we need some additional specific provisions for those types of special, services for dentures, for other things, just looking at this language that the board would require some extra step. I don't know if that's of interest to you all, but I just wanted to point that out. There was some example of that too in here.
I would agree with that.
So I think we all agree that providing dental is the direction we want to take. And please forgive me for I had a problem with my computer for some reason, but I called in and was listening to the meeting. I just couldn't join in until I could get this computer up and running. But anyway, so I sense that what we need to do is establish how much annually that is appropriate. I've heard the numbers 2,000. I'm prepared to probably jump that up at least double, and then call that. And then I like the idea about going in and finding our own dentist, not having to deal with the dental plans, because that's going to be very problematic and just labor intensive on the city's end. I think it's easier if we just come up with an amount. we have, we can go to our own dentist, pick our own dentist, we deal with reimbursement. That's the kind of direction I was taking.
So Bob, let me ask you, and for the group, so if you have a dental plan, like I mentioned earlier, with dental, with I'm sorry, with my plan with Delta is 62 a month. So if I'm using that plan for the year, and the expenses in that plan would probably make up some of that money the city would, if we ended up authorizing a ceiling amount. So would I be reimbursed on that plan at, for that year at 62 a month, which is, maybe 650, 60, I don't know. I'm just figuring in my head, 600 and some, close to 700 a month, a year.
If you look at the way Olympia does it, they allow for that to be part of their cap. So the $2,000, it's kind of small print, but I think it's $2,000, the limit on Olympia. And they allow, I think it said up to 600 of that to be toward
Routine dental services.
toward dental insurance, I thought it said, didn't it? Or did it not?
No, it says,
Yes.
premium dental and to
Yeah,
include
dental
payment
premium.
of dental premiums. Okay.
Yeah, so it does allow for it to be toward a premium.
Okay,
So
that's
we
good.
could, so we could set the cap at any number we want and allow, if you have a dental plan like yours, to reimburse that as part of that cap.
I see. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
I'm good. That makes sense.
Any thoughts as to where we would want to set the cap? And I mean, as far as financials for left one, I mean, are we, how healthy are we financially and all that, depending on, what kind of cap is reasonable? I mean, obviously, I think it should have some cap, but do we have any kind of ideas on what we'd be comfortable with as a cap?
I was certainly thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $4,000 a year, and that covers. I mean, how many
Yeah.
members are there left?
9.
Yes.
Oh.
How financially, I think we should be able to cover that.
Well, I would suggest then just, Bob, a 3,000 cap
Sure.
to the group.
You're gonna make that in the form of a motion, or we're just talking, or?
With the wording of the Olympias, maybe plagiarizing their wording, I would go with the 3,000 annually, and also the coverage of your dental plan.
As part of that 3,000?
As part of the 3,000, yes, that makes sense.
So not have a dollar amount associated with the insurance premiums, but just say insurance premiums would be covered underneath that cap.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that would be fine. And yes. So my motion is that we would go with the 3,000, which would include the dental plan that a member may have.
We have another question for discussion. Go ahead, John.
John Zimmerl here. I see we only have the local jurisdictions. Have we gone out further to look at any other plans that the left one boards in those other jurisdictions have? I mean, I can think of Puyallup, Lakewood. King County, I know has a dental plan. And this is just from speaking. I'm on the Left One Coalition Board, and I know there's a bunch of Left One boards out there that do have medical plans. I haven't researched it because I know Bob Cecil was looking into that, but I can think of one thing just right now is if you have an abscess tooth, that should be covered by medical, not by dental, because an abscess tooth is a medical problem and it can cause death if not taken care of.
And I think if John, if I understand you correctly, if that happens and the retiree goes to the city or the board and here's what's happened and it's going to exceed the $3,000 because I had this abscess and I had a lot of stuff going on, that's certainly within the prerogative of the board to approve the additional expenditure over and above the 3,000, I would think. I don't think we're limited to it, but
Yeah, I agree, Bob, but I think it should go on a case-by-case basis based
Right.
on the board's rulings.
right, anything over the 3,000 would be on a case-to-case situation. And I think that's what John Zamero was getting at, I think. If I understand you correctly, John.
You're welcome, sir.
So it looks like Tumwater has some example language that sort of addresses what John was just talking about, that says that the board retains the authority to use discretion to determine whether dental or orthodontic treatment should be approved for payment as a medical expense
There you
under
go.
all the facts and circumstances of a given case. So we could add that as some desirable language. I think also I would like to submit to the board, our idea from today is to get what sections of language was appealing to incorporate into our draft procedures and rules for LEOFF. And then we would submit that to be reviewed, like in track changes, before we actually finalize anything. So I just wanted to let you all know that was our intent, was to
It's good.
put language visually into our procedures and policies documents so you could see and make sure that's what you were trying to capture.
So if we're going with that approach, then we probably don't need motions on these and votes. We just need to kind of give you where the board is on it so that you can come back with the actual wording for us to vote on at a later date. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it harms anything to say we motion to use this language. I think we've used that in other commissions, but yeah, it's not as necessary for us to draft.
Yeah, I withdraw that motion and I agree. Maybe come back based on the conversations you've heard today with the appropriate wording, and then we can look at that for approval later.
Okay.
I think that's a good
Highlighted
idea,
what
kind of
we-
make sure we're all on the same page. And it sounds like we're all, unless anyone has anything different, sounds like we're all pretty much on the same page on where to go with the dental.
Yes.
Yep, sounds good.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Chair Greenstein, if I may respond to Mr. Zamaro, because I think he had some questions about the policies we were looking at. And the last meeting, we had talked about looking at policies kind of in the local area. We do have a LEOFF contact, but from what we understand, I know Leilani had reached out to the LEOFF one contact who's indicated that unfortunately the policies for the ones throughout the state, for the Washington State LEOFF Education Association group, they're not up to date. And so unfortunately, we do not have the capacity in HR to be able to gather every single policy and provide analysis. Certainly the board, if you wanted us to collect the information, we could provide that to the board. What we were trying to do though is sort of get a reasonable perspective so that the board was able to make a decision. And unfortunately, yes, it doesn't include, all of the surrounding cities that could be included, but unfortunately that's a more of a labor intensive process.
Sure.
I think this gives us a good enough picture. I mean, like you said, that'd be a very labor intensive to try to go out to everyone. And we do have on here, in addition to Olympia and Tumwater and Thurston, we do have Jefferson and Lewis counties. So I mean, we do have I think it's broad enough to give us the information we need unless anyone disagrees.
I think that sounds, to me, that sounds good. And I talked to Linda, the secretary of the Washington Education for LEOFF, and asked her that very question about, and it is out of date, and they don't even have the resources to pool all of that together as well. So we're kind of limited there.
Yeah, I think she said the last time was 2017, the last update. Mhm.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
This also gives us a median for, all the information you collected, which is great, and we really appreciate it. It provides a median around the county, so it kind of gives us a guide to go by. So I think that was very helpful, so thank you.
All right, sounds like we're in a good place on the dental, so we can probably move on to the policies and procedures for long-term care.
So we did the same type of analysis, pulling policies from the local jurisdictions. And this one was a bit more in-depth as far as Jefferson County and Lewis County. Thurston County didn't have anything available to go off of, but they do go into some good detail on some of on defining long-term care and providing some guidelines.
So we're gonna do the same thing we just did on the dental. We're gonna look over what exists, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, pick and choose what options we're comfortable with or uncomfortable with, and then maybe task you with drafting a policy or language. Is that where we're going?
Yes, that's correct. We're exploring for the policies and procedures.
So who's looked it over and has some comments? Ed, Sean, anybody?
Well, I have, and I did some research with other jurisdictions beyond what we have here before us. And it seemed like when it came to facilities where you might have long-term care, I'm not talking about home or that kind of thing at this point, but it was an evaluation of within a certain surrounding of the jurisdiction, certain mile base, that you would take the top most expensive and the least expensive and at least have a medium or above. And that's what I saw with that. I don't know, Marianne, if you can share that because of your experience.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for asking, Board Member Sarger. So, it really depends on the jurisdiction. Some of them actually just kind of have a one-liner in their policy, which basically says it's, on a case-by-case basis to be discussed with the board. This was one that Edmonds had looked at extensively, and this was probably the most controversial policy, simply because this one tends to have higher costs, right, that could be associated with it, simply just by the nature of, it's a facility, and if it's an Alzheimer's facility, it could potentially, or memory care, that could be 10 or 12,000 a month, right? So yes, this one definitely sparked a lot of attention, and clearly we're going to talk about it later in the meeting, but with the current coverage of at least the $3,000, which has been brought up to simple inflation. So it's not just $3,000 per month per member for the current, care that's allowed in place for assisted living or long-term care under the city's policy. But what I've seen is there are requirements about the assisted daily living activities, what that definition is, getting 3 quotes. It's a semi-private room as opposed to a private room. And then what kinds of other amenities are covered? If there is, for example, like extra padding or certain kind of bedding that needs to be required, that's typically included. But usually it's the 3 quotes and then getting the pre-approval. And in this case, the suggestion would be, if you're going to go that direction, because a lot of them are similarly framed that way, is taking, once you decide what that cap is. So first thing would be the insurance would apply first, right? So the 3, whatever that amount, is, that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then after that, whatever the, sort of say, if you decide, Edmonds had a cap, I think, of 7,500, which in today's dollars, may or may not work. Remember, they're more up north, so the costs are a little bit more expensive up there. They did Snohomish County, right? Edmonds is Snohomish County. So again, this might be an easy one too, frankly, to just get 3 quotes from Thurston County, from a facility in Thurston County. That's actually not too difficult. I did that when I was in Edmonds, just saying, hey, what's it like to get, what would the cost be, right? Semi-private room, what's the coverage like? And also checking with, there's a way on Medicare where you can go and you can check the facility and make sure that they're a highly rated facility, right? They haven't had any health inspections or issues. So that would sort of be the recommendation is, if the board was so inclined, we could bring back some information about kind of what that, if you're not comfortable looking at a cap, of what that could look like. And then, of course, if there's someone had submitted a request and it was beyond the cap, the board could always, have further discussion. That's
Yes.
always.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it'd be really helpful too. Question for you, when you did this in Edmonds, so the policy you said is about a $3,000 a month cap, right? So when you said you went with 7,500, was that on top of the 3,000 or was that inclusive of?
Oh,
the 3,000?
no, Chair Greenstein, let me just quickly explain that. So here at Lacey, Lacey was smart enough to realize that at some point, right, they say maybe like it's a 50-50. Half of all people at some point may need that long-term or assisted living care, unfortunately, right? And so they were savvy enough to actually purchase policies for the LEOFF members, which was at that time $3,000 in 1995. Right, which now has a greater value today. And it actually has much more of a value today. So having said that, Edmonds didn't, unfortunately, like a number of cities, have the foresight to go, hey, for our 40 members, we should probably purchase this, because that was, way back in the 80s, right? And as you know, with having been in the industry, that, right, it might have been a harder sell at that time. So now people are living longer. They're, arguably healthier, right? We found different ways. So what Edmonds did is we went out and looked at 3 facilities and got quotes and then set the rate. And the 7,500 was specific to that area. And that was actually, and it wasn't just, okay, we're going to pick 3 just in this one, within a radius of 5 miles, right? It was kind of like looking at Medicare and looking at sort of the ratings of the facilities, but then taking like 3 different facilities that are somewhat dispersed geographically in the county, and then bringing that back and saying, hey, here's what this covers. Here's what the cost is, right?
Okay.
Are there specific facilities that any of our members right now know of that we could jot down the names for that are in our region?
We do have a couple off of Yelm Highway that are actually in the city of Lacey.
Mhm.
I think that's a good starting place, at least. I'm not sure the names of them, but they're right off of Yelm Highway, just before the Chehalis Western Trail, like right there on the edge of Lacey.
Bonaventure, I believe, yes. Uh-huh.
I think you're right. I think that is one of them.
What's it
Yeah,
called?
Bonaventure.
Bonaventure. Okay.
that's the one I'm most familiar with, having a relative there.
Do you know what so the inflation rider, so they bought it, the 3,095, but they were smart enough to buy it with the inflation rider, which is great. Do you know what that rider was, what that benefit is now?
Chair Greenstein, I was just looking that up. Hang on one second. I should have had that ready.
That's all right. Because typical, I know when, again, I at one time in my career, I sold that. It was usually like 3 to 5%, something in there was a typical inflation rider. But over that many years, that becomes a sizable amount of money.
Right. It was a simple inflator of 5%, but I'm just
Right.
looking up the email that came and.
and this
So-
is go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So let me see here. It says, okay, 5%. Example, the employee's monthly benefit is 3,000. It's capped at 6,000. So we have a contact over at Unum that we were able to get hold of. So basically it said, I had a different amount because mine was based on compound inflation. The monthly benefit increases 5% of the original coverage amount each year until it doubles, meaning the inflation stops inflating when the original monthly benefit doubled. So the great thing is employees' monthly benefit is 3,000. So it was 3,000 back in 95 and now it's 6,000. So that's excellent, frankly. That's
So
a
that's
good.
maxed out then. It's at 6,000 now.
Yep.
That's excellent. That's a strong benefit.
Well, so my question, Marianne, is when I, probably before COVID hit, I was working with Kelly about this. And I actually called this company back in New York. I think that carries our policy. Am I right? And and I just recall calling them about it, and they indicated there were 2 members out of all the members that had a different coverage. Original members that, and I think, there were 2 of us that for some reason had a little different coverage with this insurance company. Do you have that?
So they actually gave us a printout, and I told her, I said, I have more questions about it. And so it's, you submit something and then you hear from them 4 days later. So I think Councilmember Sorger, unfortunately, it's a matter of timing. I don't have that data yet, but I said, I understand there are different policy amounts and there may be a couple members who have different amounts. Can you tell me about that? And can you tell me why? So I'm still waiting to hear back on that.
Okay.
So if that ends up being applicable, which, it could very well be that maybe there was an option that they could, or maybe there was an actuarial, if you're in, as Chair Greenstein knows, right, in a different age bracket or something, because there was a bit of a period of, different ages in the left group that maybe, their costs were lower. And so the chances that they're going to use it get more of a value of the policy. That could have been too. So I'm still seeing what I can find out from that. It's interesting. We haven't had a good contact there at Unum, but if you're interested too, Councilmember Sorger, I'm certainly happy to give you that contact information. It's
Yeah, and maybe by the next meeting, we could get a more definite, amount there. And yeah.
You bet.
If in fact everyone is at a $6,000 benefit, that's a pretty good number. I mean, that puts us in a much better place than if it was 3,000, based on what the cost of long-term care is today. 6,000 may still not be enough for any facility, but it's certainly going to make a much bigger dent.
Absolutely.
So one thing to keep in mind is that there are 9 members, and then of those, some of them may be veterans, which would qualify for the Soldiers Home. And I know that's not the first route that we go, but it could be that that individual, it would be their choice to choose the Soldiers Home and want to stay there for whatever reason. So I think engaging them kind of case by case, because I agree with what was said earlier, is that the amount can get a little pricey for the care that's being provided, especially if someone has special needs that they need attending to. So I just wanted to kind of have us keep that in mind to be able to help our 9 folks.
And to that point about there being 9 members, and just to help us make sure that when we're researching facilities, like for these quotes, that we're looking in the right region, is everyone on this side of the mountains, or do we have any active members that are on the east side? We do. Okay, so maybe I would also want to pull a quote from facilities in some of the major areas of the east side, Wenatchee or Yakima or Spokane.
I think that makes sense.
Did you have something?
I looked into long-term care for my wife about 3 years ago through a financial advisor of mine. And at that time, it was $10,000 a month. And that was minimum of the middle of the stream.
Yeah, no, it can get
So
very expensive.
It does get very expensive. Now, the other thing, according to what I've read, the RCW says that LEOFF has to pay for our medical, and that includes long-term. And it doesn't say the bottom, it doesn't say the top. It just says that you have to pay the LEOFF one board for your jurisdiction has to pay for your long-term care. Now, I know Bob told me that Bob Cecil told me he wanted the best for our people. Now, I don't know what the kitty is for here for LEOFF one members, and I don't know what the city has as far as a pot to draw from. I know they do, but the only thing I can say is we're talking about the 7,500. Now, is that the 7,500, and anything over that, LEOFF one still has to pick up. According to law, according to the RCW, LEOFF has to pick it up.
And I wouldn't speak to that. I don't know. I don't know if Mary Ann has anything she wants to add there or anyone else does.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Greenstein. So, Mr. Zamaro, that is a really salient point in that the RCW, from what I understand, because obviously this is a very important benefit for the members. They talk about what's medically necessary and then sort of the minimal. There's a little bit of a distinction. So to your point, there are certain things that, again, and this is why it's important. And with these policies where we say, you know, if the doctor has stated that it's medically necessary or, you know, to that effect, and I'm not suggesting that a doctor would say something's not medically necessary, but the standard typically has been, you know, medical necessity versus the minimum standard of care. So the RCW points out what's actually considered the minimum standard of care, and the board determines what's medically necessary based on documentation that's provided and based on policies. So it is not uncommon because of the fact, unfortunately, to your point, Edmonds, well, Edmonds was in a different situation, but typically LEOFF is more of an unfunded liability, right? There's money that's set aside in the budget, but you don't really know. We have an actuarial report that hopefully we'll be able to share with the board when the next one that comes out, because that's important for you guys to be able to see, right, those costs as well. But having said that, you know, and that's a projection of what the cost would be, right, through the expenses, the projected expenses, right, the total cost of the medical expenses for the group through the lifetime of the member. But having said that, it's really important to note that the disability boards for the cities and counties throughout the state, they do set policies because they are allowed to make determinations of saying, look, we do only have, you know, a certain amount that is budgeted for. Now, that doesn't mean that the board can't say we want to budget for more, but it does become, you know, a matter of, okay, again, dental expenses, right? It's like, it's not actually outlined in, as I mentioned, in the RCW. Then this becomes the, okay, but we understand that there are medical reasons. And so the board has made a determination based on medical necessity that this is going to go beyond the minimum in the RCW. Does that make sense? I hope that helps a little bit.
It does for me. So is there anything else here? Or do you guys have an idea of where we're headed and what we need to do for the next meeting?
Well, I have the notes for getting the individualized quotes from long-term care facilities, Bonaventura, Soldiers Home, just to get an idea of what that is. And then I'll find another one in this region, and then I'll look at the Wenatchee, Yakima, Spokane areas. But I did want to see if there was additional language, because like Jefferson County, Lewis County, Olympia, they have some sort of, you know, additional things that could be reviewed, just like dental. I wanted to see if there was anything in particular in those lists that were appealing to the board that we could, similar to dental, provide in the draft policies for you to review as the updates.
Do you have any specific recommendations at all?
Well, I know that when we were just looking at some of these responses, the detail that Jefferson County had was kind of nice. I mean, for us, when we're reviewing expenses and then bringing things back to the board for approval, it's nice to have clear direction in the policy, like, oh, this is what we can review, here's what we can authorize. So I liked just the level of detail that they had, but not necessarily that we would want to adopt all of it. Then the other question, because I personally am not yet familiar with the difference, I know what my preference would be is in-home, but for Olympia as an example, it says, if medically possible, the board prefers to pay for in-home care rather than nursing home care. I don't know if that's something that's appealing. I personally would want to be in my own home instead of a facility if possible. So that's one of those things to put forward for consideration. And Olympia goes into further detail to say if the board approves in-home or nursing home care, it will pay up to the amount of Panorama Rehabilitation and Convalescent Care Center in Lacey that charges for 24-hour-a-day nursing home care. So they kind of use a specific reference to say whatever Panorama would be charging, that's what we would
That might be,
approve.
panorama might be a good one for you to, as your third one for locally, I would
Yep.
think. It's,
All right.
you know, it's reputable, it's got a good reputation here locally and everything for sure. You know, I would say that in my experience in selling long-term care over the years, I would say probably 99.9% of people would prefer at-home care to nursing home care when applicable, right? It becomes a matter of when it's medically necessary to go beyond that. And most long-term care policies even stipulate that you use at-home care before you would go to a nursing home. Again, medically necessary to go to an actual facility because the cost is typically far greater to go to a facility than it is to have home care. So that makes sense to me to have that in there. And I think
The LEOFF Education Association also mentioned that the trend, like Councilman said, is that folks kind of want to live in place, they call it in place, which is at home with family members and not wanting to go to those long-term care facilities. So we've discussed this a lot in the past, and that seems to be the end result.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone that would choose a nursing home over home health if it was manageable for their health situation. Anyone else? Anything else on this? Anyone have any specifics from any of these samples that we have that they want to be sure are included or anything, or?
And if members also didn't get a chance, because I know we had problems opening attachments, if you weren't able to look in depth at the Excel spreadsheet that Jenny provided, we could also, you know, leave it open for you to email us your preference from this list, maybe within the next 2 weeks, so that we could incorporate that into our draft presentation for the next LEOFF board meeting.
That'd be great, because this is the first I'm seeing of it because of IT issues and not being able to open attachments on my city devices, so.
I do like where it says medically reasonable versus medically necessary, because this care is obviously necessary, but at what point does it become reasonable? Because if one of the places that's chosen or is looked at for a quote or an estimate is the cost is outrageous, then I see using that verbiage is pretty important.
So I have highlighted the wording from Olympia then based on it just says if medically possible, the board prefers to pay for in-home care rather than nursing home care. Is that what you're referring to? Instead of saying medically necessary, or were you referring to a different set of language?
Towards the bottom of the spreadsheet where it says medically reasonable, and it's in quotes.
The board will take into consideration what the member's choice is as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Can you tell at-large member Smith if the jurisdiction, what jurisdiction you're looking at? I'm just not opening it. I want to highlight it.
I couldn't see to the left. I don't have it right in front of me, but it was it looked to be the last one on the list. And it was in the top row sentence.
Oh, I see it now.
Medically reasonable charges. Okay.
Yep.
There it is.
Thank you.
Should we move on then to the update on the Unum long-term care insurance? Is there Who has that information?
Yes, Mary Ann has
Okay.
the update on the UNUM.
I do have something real quick. I have another
Yeah.
meeting to go to, unfortunately. I have to jump off. But thank you very much for letting us speak towards this. I believe it's very important.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks,
Thank
Sean.
you.
Have a good afternoon.
You too, thanks.
And again, Chair Greenstein, just for the record to reflect that at-large member Smith has unfortunately had to depart the meeting at 1:05. So I think you're waiting on me to talk about UNUM. So that's been a bit of a fun process, as Leilani and Jenny know, because it's kind of like, I called in and, they're on East Coast time. So that was also an interesting thing. And when I called in, I actually wasn't able to get a hold of someone right away. So that was an interesting thing too. But in any case, after several phone calls, emails, I did get a hold of, as I mentioned, our contact. Her name is Neri Page. And so I will provide that information to you, Board Member Sorger, as well, if you're interested in having that too. But the piece that we talked about was obviously that the policy is now $6,000, and it might be a little bit more for a couple of members. And so we'll find that out. So that's really, really good news. I think we have the last copy. I think Board Member Sorger, you sent that and I sent that to them. There isn't, obviously they just took that copy and that's been the copy. It's like, looks like it's from the 90s.
It is, yeah.
Right. So I appreciate that. That was helpful because again, we're still kind of trying to sort out what those details are, but we'll have hopefully more information to you by the next meeting, as we talked about. So that's really
Great.
just that we do have a contact now. We've established that and we're getting more information.
Thanks, Marianne.
Okay, I guess other business co-chair. Looking to an elected co-chair, is that what it is?
So that was also, Mary Ann was looking into that, and I think I think it's the same answer, that we're still, more information is to come.
And I also want to say to the board that Council Member Stedman is actually now in the meeting and would like to come on to our panel to speak.
Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know I've been watching since the beginning. I just wasn't elevated as a panelist, so but I'm here, and even though Smitty had to leave, we still have an agenda, a quorum. So I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention. I've been watching and listening the whole time, just couldn't speak.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add, Mike, since you weren't able to speak on either the dental or long-term care at this point?
No,
Or
I mean,
good with the direction.
yep, I'm good with the direction. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So the co-chair thing is just, there's more to come, is that, so there's nothing for us to discuss on that? Or-
Chair Greenstein, if I may, I can provide a little detail because that one was the one that I said I would, specifically go and look at it. So this brought up an interesting question. It brought up the question about what is the protocol that the board is following. There isn't a requirement, but the question was, does the board follow the Robert's Rules of Orders or order, or is it a different set of rules? And I said, I think it's kind of a hybrid, right? And again, that's a conversation probably for another day, but our city attorney was on vacation, and I first thought, oh, well, I'll ask MRSC because, knowing how busy he was trying to save a little time. MRSC came back and said, well, actually, I don't believe there's a requirement unless you have something actually in your policies or code that prevents that. But, the default is go and ask your city attorney. So then I kicked it to Dave, our city attorney, and he goes, I'm going on vacation. And then, he got back to me. He did get back to me, but said, hey, I can talk to you Friday. I said, well, we're having the meeting Thursday. But since, obviously and he needs to just kind of understand that we're following sort of a hybridized process is what I would call it, which is not atypical for boards to do, right? There's no requirement that says you have to follow Robert's Rules.
We call it Bob Light.
Right. So anyway, I thought it would be a simple yes or no. So I just wanted you guys to understand that it wasn't a matter of playing phone tag. It was a matter of this is where we're at, right? So we'll have more before the next meeting.
No worries. I don't think anybody's overly concerned with that part of with how we run our meetings, really, right? As long as we're getting to consensus, which is kind of the goal, really. So, Then I guess the last thing on the agenda was the Washington State Left Education Association Conference, which is May 10th through 13th.
Yes, so I was able to connect with Linda and get that information. I originally was accidentally excluded from that email distribution. And so I have that information. Do we have anybody that is interested? I will be sending out an email as well to the board, but I believe we are able to have 2 people attend. Do we have board members that would like to attend the Waslia conference?
Where is it?
It's in Lake Chelan.
Lake Chelan, yeah. I would go, but I would defer if Lenny wanted to go or somebody else.
I'm not available those dates. I'll be out of town actually, so.
I'm not
That's
sure if
all.
Smitty wanted to go either. And however, this is a really good educational conference, and we have not had to, and excuse me, but I thought in prior minutes, it was up to 3 that could go. And also, since we haven't sent anybody for 2-3 years, there's been a bit of a savings, of course. And if we have more than that, I would suggest we should allow them to attend.
Do we know what the cost is, what the expense of it is?
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's around about $520 for a full registration.
Okay.
And then, of course, you're looking at rooms for 2 or 3 nights as well. And there, the traditional room is $162. So, but I got to tell you, it's well worth it. It's a good exchange, and you really learn a lot from it. I don't know yet if I'm going to be able to go, but I would suggest that if we have more than 2, we should allow that based on the past few years.
I'd be supportive of that too if we can. It's only a 5-member board, and I know I can't go, so that narrows it down to at most 4. So I think if we can, if it's within the budget and we can do it, I'd be supportive of whoever wants to go being able to go.
So we should let Jenny, within a certain amount of time, because I mean, this came up rather quick.
Yes. So yep, I will be emailing you all after this meeting concludes, and I will send you all of the information. And then if we could let me know within the next 2 weeks, if you would like to attend, that way we can go ahead and make the arrangements.
Is there something in our policy that allows 2? Because I'm assuming if we're going to allow more than 2, we may actually need action for that if it's in our policy to allow 2. Does anyone know?
It was in the minutes. I don't know if it was a policy, but.
I'm just wondering, because if the policy says 2 and we want to amend that or make an exception, we would probably need to take action on that, I would think. Right, Mary Ann?
Yes, Chair Greenstein. It's always just good for clarity. And same thing, Board Member Sorger, just good for clarity, right? Because you know what I mean? That would be a great idea to take the motion, and to the point that there hasn't been, the ability to go to the conference, and who knows what new information might have come up, that might be helpful for the board.
So Ed, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, well, the motion I made was that whomever is interested out of the 5-member board be able to attend this year.
I would second.
Any discussion? Anyone have any comments or questions on that? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
And also, Lenny, looking at the agenda, I'm looking at a review of chapter 41.26. And there's a part in here about veterans benefits, the audiology, or if I'm pronouncing that correct, on the hearing types of issues. And just real quick here, there's elder care and 2 or 3 other things that might be beneficial for members to know about. We can come back and report on that on whoever attends.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Anything from anyone else? Anything? No? All right. Well, if not, we are adjourned, and see everyone at the next meeting. Thank you all.
Yep, thank you.
Here, everybody.
All right,
Appreciate
thank you.
more time.